Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am so happy to see some of your faces and some of your boxes with your names. But thank you for joining us today. This is our Utah Safety Council's Women in Safety webinar. So if you're looking for a different safety class, you're not in the right Zoom room. But yeah, so we are the Women in Safety organization. Couple things quickly as we get started. I wanted to mention our mission. So the mission of the Utah Safety Council Women in Safety organization is to recognize, motivate, and support women in the workplace who have chosen or been assigned safety-related responsibilities. Women in Safety is a collaborative team that supports women in the safety and health workspace with educational, networking, and developmental opportunities. Members of the organization are committed to encourage, elevate, and give back to women. Our purpose, the Women in Safety organization, was formed to share advantages of association by means of open meetings, conferences, educational events, correspondence, resources, and publications to instill and progress the quality of safety programs and personal improvement. The organization was developed and is administered by the Utah Safety Council. So that is just a little bit about the Women in Safety organization. I like to kind of start off with our mission and purpose. We have a lot of people joining us today that have not joined us before. So I'm really excited, and I especially want to welcome you in joining us. So as far as membership goes, we are an inclusive organization, and membership is open to anyone that supports our mission and our purpose. And all you have to do to be a member is just participate and engage. So each year we do have we do have 6 events, including a selection and presentation of our WISH Award, which is Women in Safety and Health. So today is one of our 6 annual events here. And before we get started and introduce our guest, I want to just mention quickly a couple of things. So really excited about our guest today. And I'm trying not to steal Naomi's thunder because she's going to introduce her, but one of the things that we really liked about her, and then after chatting with her, I guess in person via Zoom yesterday, we really love her enthusiasm and energy and how engaging she is. And so what I would love to do is, if you are able to put your camera on, we want to see your face. And this is going to kind of be engaging. We're going to use the chat. We're going to use the hand raising. So we're going to test our Zoom skills, right? Like by this point, we should be rock stars. So we're going to see how it goes. But we do know, and part of the reason why we wanted to have Dr. Glass come is because it's an engaging conversation, right? We know in the safety world that our focus is to keep those crucial conversations going when it comes to safety. And Dr. Glass is very like-minded about keeping those crucial conversations going, and a good way to do that is engagement. And so if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to see your faces, and we'll try not to judge you too much, but we might if you don't turn on. We'd love to see you, and then just let's participate in the chat and just kind of engage in our event today. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it, right? So let's just keep that in mind. At the end, so I'm going to this is recording, right? And at the end, I'm going to send out an email with a link to this recording. And I have a couple of announcements, and we have dates for the rest of the year, what we're doing for the rest of the year. So I'm going to follow this up with that email, and I'll include a link for that. And then kind of at the end, we're going to quickly go over those dates so that you know and what's going on. And then I have a quick poll as we plan those. So stay with us till the end, and we will do that. And then just remember, I will email, camera, what else? What else do I have here? Okay, so I also want to say, we really appreciate the Utah Labor Commission that's who basically funds our organization with grants, and we get to do a lot of cool stuff because of that. And so I just want to mention that we're very appreciative of these opportunities, and we acknowledge that that's because of their support and commitment to women in safety that we get to do that. So thank you. And then I'd also just like to say thanks to Megan Spackman, who is over more than 6 feet away from me, helping moderate and making sure that I don't do too many crazy things. So thank you, Megan, for always doing that, and I appreciate that. And then the rest of my team, the Utah Safety Council team, they are amazing, and I'm so lucky to have such a great team. A lot of them are on, so I appreciate you guys joining. So thank you for that. Okay, now the Women in Safety Steering Committee. So I am the luckiest one. I'm Lisa, if I didn't mention that before, and I'm the membership manager at the Utah Safety Council. And one of the, probably my favorite part of the job is that I get to oversee the Women in Safety program. And so I get to do that with 3 other amazing women, and they are my steering committee /vent /soundboard /friends, right? So I really appreciate them, and I just want to mention really quickly, so Candy Schenkenberg, and I saw her earlier, if her camera's on, she can wave. She's at First Med Clinic, and I think we bothered her about fit testing and COVID testing very recently, so thank you, Candy. And then we have Joy Glad, I think Joy, and she is an awesome safety professional. She's a consultant. She has her own business and is just an amazing instructor. We adore her, and she's on the steering committee as well. And then we also have Naomi Resendez, and she works for Oakland Construction, and she manages all their claims. So that's, you can imagine how she's great, and so smart, and thank goodness we have Naomi. So Naomi is amazing as well for another reason today. She was the one who basically organized this event and reached out to Dr. Glass, and came back from another women's organization, our friends, I think it was ASSP, I think it was a WISE event out at Rio Tinto, I think, but Naomi is the one that did all the work and wanted to hear from Dr. Glass. And so she helps out a lot and makes sure that we kind of stay on track. And she gave us this information. We were all really excited about it. So I wanted to just say thank you to Naomi for putting this together. And then I'm going to kind of let Naomi take over and introduce our guests. So go ahead, Naomi.
Good morning, everyone. I am so glad that you guys were able to join us today. I am super excited to introduce to you our special speaker, Dr. Christy Glass. And I actually had the privilege to hear her speak at a Women Leadership Institute event. And I had some great takeaways from her speech. So when our committee decided to do this topic, I couldn't think of anyone better than Dr. Glass. So I'm glad she was able to join us, and I'm so excited to hear what she has in store for us today. I would also like to recommend that you read her research on the glass cliff. If you haven't already, do so. It was, I learned a lot from that. So I really appreciate it. I know that a lot of hard work went into that. So thank you, Dr. Christy Glass, for just joining us and making time for us. And we're just so excited to hear from you today. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Christy Glass.
Thank you so much, Naomi. And thank you to Lisa. I'm so glad to be with you today. I've just begun to learn about your group, and I'm thankful for the work that you do. And I just love the organization. I love the mission statement. In fact, some of my strategies that I'll share today about promoting yourself and supporting others' careers the mission seems just perfectly in line with some of that. So I'll start by sharing my screen. Beyond bias, promoting and supporting yourself at work. As Lisa said, I would love, as much as we can have engagement over Zoom, I would love that. I'll speak a little for a while, but then we'll have some time for conversation too. And I would love to hear what some of these patterns and what some of these strategies might look like from where you are, because of course you're the expert about your field and your career and your job. I'm not. So hopefully we can have a great conversation after I share some of what I'd like to say. So here are today's goals. I want to begin by naming some of the common patterns that we see, particularly in jobs, careers, teams that are male dominated. I think it's really important to name these biases. Toni Morrison, the late, amazing American writer, wrote that our ability to resist inequality or to move beyond inequality in part involves the power to name our reality, the power to define our reality. And I think too often we experience things at work that we don't have a name for. And when that happens, I think one of the tendencies is to blame ourselves or to second guess ourselves or, to wonder if it's us. But I think there's power in knowing what some of these common patterns are so that when we confront them, we know it's not about us. It's nothing we did. It's nothing we didn't do, but rather it's part of the nature of the context of our jobs. So then I'll move on to talking about some key strategies. Number one, how you can begin to promote your own accomplishments. And as part of that, how you can start to build solidarity within the job with women, with other women, certainly with men allies, how we can start to build some solidarity that helps support our own careers, but certainly helps support the careers of others as well. Before I talk about some of the common patterns, I just want to highlight two ways that we often think about gender bias, or two ways in which we try and fix gender bias that aren't that helpful, that actually research finds just doesn't work or doesn't work very well. And the first way we tend to think about fixing bias is what I call the bad apple approach. And in fact, I think this is one of the most common approaches to gender bias. The idea is that if we recognize that gender bias is a problem, we tend to assume that it's only because there are a few bad apples, right? And that if we could just fix those apples, send them to mandatory training or somehow, figure out how to fix them, then the problem of gender bias goes away. So when we take this approach, this hyper-individual approach, right? It's kind of blaming these individuals, not looking at the big picture, the big patterns, or the systems that may be leading us to confront some challenges. The other way we tend to fix bias is by blaming women themselves. So we're either, dismissing the problem as just a few bad apples, or we send women, all kinds of messages that the problem of bias rests with them. So for example, we tell women to lean in, be more assertive or more competitive or more ambitious. Other messages are to be less competitive and less assertive and less ambitious, right? We tell women to negotiate but not be aggressive about it. Be confident, but also be really likable and warm. All of these messages that we often send to women has the subtle effect of saying that something you're doing is causing some of these challenges that you faced. But we know from enormous body of research that many of these patterns that I'll share with you are patterned, systemic, and robust over time. And so I think it's important to at least highlight some of the ways we tend to approach these challenges so that we don't fall into the trap of blaming individuals. And certainly we want to avoid blaming women themselves for the bias that they experience. One of the most common forms of bias that we see is called token bias. This is the result of working in a context where you are significantly underrepresented, where you are one of the only women working in a team or in a job. And I know many of you, if not most of you, work in jobs where that might be true. When we have these kinds of imbalances in terms of numbers within the job or the team or the group, we tend to see very predictable challenges that women face. So, for example, the experience of being both invisible, but also hyper visible, right? Invisible for certain things, but also you stand out like a sore thumb because maybe you're the only one. Women in these situations also face a lot of scrutiny and performance pressure. There may be perceptions that you're an outsider, that you're kind of an interloper, a pressure to assimilate or to be one of the boys. And this can lead to, my research shows that this can lead to kind of hyper self-monitoring of how you dress and how you talk and how you interact with others. I've interviewed many people, both women and men and women of color in token situations. And one of the things that I hear a lot is what one respondent called the one mistake rule. That there's so much scrutiny and performance pressure that even small mistakes can be exaggerated and amplified. Folks have told me that, I have to be flawless. I have to be perfect because, anything that I do that's not perfect might be held against me. Token bias can also lead to a sense that you're excluded from key networks or opportunities. It can mean that you face a burden of doubt with regard to your competence or capability or credibility. And this can also lead to the intensification of stereotypes. And there's lots of research about the consequences of these kind of uneven representation, uneven numbers in jobs, and the result of tokenism within jobs. We see higher rates of discrimination and harassment, lower rates of mentoring and support from colleagues, distancing and competition from other women, downgrading, being placed in a job perhaps beneath your expertise or experience, greater pay inequity, blocked mobility, being shut out for key leadership roles, lower job satisfaction, and higher attrition rates. So this is a really big deal because not only does it kind of increase the pressures that you may experience in the job, but it also means that we have some really talented women who may not be achieving their full potential within the job or may be leaving over time because things get too challenging. The other kind of bias we see in these, especially in contexts where there's skewed numbers where women are significantly underrepresented, is what's called prove it again bias. This is a result of the pressure to overcome the burden of doubt, the burden of doubt that you don't quite have what it takes. There's a sense that you have to be twice as good or work twice as hard or to be flawless in order to be seen as capable. This leads to what's called the prove it again bias, the need to constantly prove yourself again and again, even across the career. Part of my research focuses on people in very senior leadership. And what you would think is that, once you've paid your dues and reached the top and now have this really key leadership position, that some of these pressures would go away. But what we actually see in conversations with folks who hold, white women and men and women of color who hold high, really visible senior leadership roles, is that these pressures don't go away, especially in contexts where they're significantly underrepresented. The other kind of pattern we see is called tightrope bias or the double bind bias. This is when women experience the pressure to perform in ways that don't raise alarm bells for others, to perform in ways that make their male colleagues comfortable. The problem is, if you're too feminine, you're not seen as effective or credible. But if you behave in stereotypically masculine ways, you're seen as not likable, right? So you have to kind of walk this tightrope, being assertive enough, but not too assertive, being warm and likable, but not too warm and likable, that you're not seen as serious. This leads, as I mentioned before, this need to kind of hyper monitor or manage your performance at work. You can't show anger, for example, because that can undermine perceptions that you're steady and competent. A recent experimental study found that successful women in male-dominated fields, just by virtue of their success, tend to be viewed as more difficult to work with or as unfriendly. This highlights for me this incredible balance that women have to walk in male-dominated jobs to be seen as credible, but also to be seen as likable. I just completed a statewide study in Utah of bias in law, and one of the really common patterns that emerge from that study is what's called distancing bias. This takes many forms. It can include avoidance or exclusion or even protective behaviors, right? Shielding women, for example, from demanding or dangerous assignments. One of the themes that came out in the recent study was what's called the Pence rule, the unwillingness of male colleagues to be alone with their women colleagues. So we saw across the legal profession, women experiencing a lack of mentorship or sponsorship simply because their male colleagues didn't want to be alone with them, didn't want to travel with them, didn't want to go for lunch with them, didn't want to meet in a closed door office with them. And this is a problem because it can mean that women are excluded from good assignments. They may be unable or less able to develop strong relationships with men in the career who hold senior roles, who can help their career advance. It can lead to isolation, as I mentioned, a lack of mentoring or sponsorship, and a constant reinforcement of difference. One of the other really common biases, and I'll end here, there are more. I just wanted to share some of these biases with you so that you can kind of see if you've ever experienced this. That this isn't you, this isn't anything you did or didn't do. Rather, these are some of the patterns we observe over time and across different contexts. Motherhood bias refers to the systemic disadvantages that mothers face in the workplace in terms of perceived competence, commitment, and access to promotion. In fact, research finds that even after controlling for education, experience, and work commitment, being a mother significantly intensifies gender biases. This is particularly true in terms of evaluating women for leadership roles. One legal scholar has termed this the maternal wall, the perception that mothers don't really have what it takes to compete and rise to the top and do what it takes to be an effective leader. A recent study, however, a recent national study found that women with children on average are actually more engaged at work, more committed to their careers, and more motivated to continue their career over time. The problem is that mothers and fathers face very different expectations at work. While fathers are expected to kind of ramp up or man up and kind of buckle down at work, mothers are expected to kind of ratchet back and are often downgraded or rerouted to less demanding roles, even when that doesn't reflect their preference. Now, I review all of these, and my guess is many of these sound familiar to you. Maybe most of them sound familiar to you, but I think, as I mentioned, I think it's important to name them so that we can remind each other that it's not about you. These problems are organizational. These problems are systemic, not individual. And we know this because we've studied these patterns across many organizations, sectors, industries, jobs, and the patterns continue, we continue to see the same pattern. In fact, study after study shows that both gender and racial inequality at work is due to bias, not differences in behavior or competence or work commitment. When you're underestimated at work or dismissed because of your gender, your race, or ethnicity, or sexual orientation, the reality is that that has nothing to do with your capabilities, but rather it has to do with the structure of the job or the organization. Now, the million-dollar question is, what can we do about this? What can we do when we experience bias? How can we more effectively navigate bias? Now, there are a lot of things organizations can do, and I'm happy to talk about that in our discussion. There are many policies and practices that organizations can adopt that significantly reduce the biases that I've just mentioned. But what I'll talk about today is how you can promote and support yourselves over time in your career, despite facing some of these challenges. So I'll share 4 strategies that you can adopt that are supported by research. And I'd be happy, as I mentioned, I'd be happy in the Q&A to discuss some of the organizational strategies. So the first strategy I'd like to share is the strategy of centering your contributions. When you have an opportunity or when you are confronted with the burden of doubt about your competence, make an effort to center your contributions. When possible, refocus the attention, not on your gender or your personality, but on what's called individuating information. This is specific information about your expertise, your experience, your accomplishments, and your performance. So I know this can feel uncomfortable or be hard for some of us. That's okay. And the key here is not to adopt some kind of arrogant posture or somehow be one of these jerks who's constantly self-promoting. That's not what I'm advocating for at all. Rather, I'm encouraging you to be prepared with detailed information about factual and detailed information about your expertise, your experience, your training, and your accomplishments. And it turns out research finds that the more specific information people have about you, the less likely they will be to rely on stereotypes. Now, this strategy can be paired with another really vital strategy that has been shown in research to reduce bias. This is the strategy of reinforcing your commitment to the shared goals of the team or of the group. It turns out that psychologically, we're much more likely to pay attention to that individuating information rather than biased assumptions for teammates rather than competitors. And this makes sense, right? When I see you as my teammate, that signals in my brain that my success is dependent on your success, and your success is dependent on my success. On the other hand, when I see you as competition, I'm much more likely to push you away. I'm much more likely to see you as other, right? Not as my teammate. And it turns out that this sense of interdependence, this sense that we're in this together and that my success is tied to your success, is associated with significantly less bias. For example, when individuals know that their pay or promotion or work success is dependent on you and your success, they're much more likely to support you rather than stand in your way. And it turns out even more so that in male-dominated jobs, women gain higher status and more influence when they are perceived to be more team-oriented than when they are perceived to be more self-oriented. So combining these two strategies, centering your contributions and constantly reinforcing your commitment to the team's success, can be a really powerful, in combination, bias disruptor. Make sure folks know your accomplishments, but also know you're committed to the group's success. You're talented, accomplished, and you're a team player. Together, these two strategies, even used subtly, can shift the way in which you're viewed and can shift the extent to which bias is used to evaluate you over time. The second strategy is to build a board. It sounds like the Women in Safety group is a really important way in which you're trying to build a village for one another so that you can better support each other across the career. Find ways to build a sustained support network of other women in your field, organization, or profession. Now, this can be really challenging because women, especially in male-dominated jobs, experience a lot of pressure to distance themselves from other women in order to prove their loyalty to the dominant group. And this can lead to distancing and competition among women out of a perception that there's kind of scarce resources. There aren't many of us, and I need to kind of protect what's mine, and I need to distance myself from other women. And this can also lead to heightened stereotypes about women by other women, right? I've heard in many interviews, women tell me, I don't want to work for a woman, or, I avoid, I avoid kind of getting too close to other women, or, women as bosses are nightmares, or they're bitchy, or, all of this stuff that we internalize about other women. The point here is that it's not about other women. It's about the context of the job. When we're significantly how do I know? Well, in female-dominated jobs, these things are much less common. We're much more likely to see these, women hold negative perceptions of other women in jobs where they are significantly underrepresented. So the more that we can be conscious of that tendency, the better we are to avoid the trap of viewing other women as competition, as enemies, as those who need to be avoided. And instead, we can see other women as resources and important sources of support. And this can reduce our sense of isolation, and it can provide us with a lot of strategic guidance for how we navigate our careers. And it's important to remember, and my research over time shows this in spades, the more women there are in leadership positions, the more women there are in positions of authority and influence, the better things are for all women. We see this again and again and again across careers and across organizations. So the more we can be aware of some of the tendencies to kind of distance ourselves from other women, and the more we can lean into actually developing a strong network of strategic, smart, talented women who can help us and whom we can help navigate the career, the better. Now, what are you looking for your board or from your village? Number one, you want honesty. You need to surround yourself with women who will be brutally honest with you. Not critical for critical sake, but who will be honest, right? Who know how talented you are, who know how capable you are, and who will be completely honest with you about strategies, effective strategies, less effective strategies. We all need people who support us, who will go to the mat with us, but also people who will be really honest with us. So what the function that the board can play is you can help each other brainstorm strategies, right? If you face a challenge, go to your board, have them help you brainstorm strategies, help them remind you that this isn't that this isn't about you, this isn't personal, and help you think through strategies that you can take to overcome some of these challenges. Your board can also help you identify opportunities. The more you have strong networks across your industry or across other industries, the more likely you are to identify opportunities when they arise. You can use the board to promote one another. Not only can you highlight your accomplishments, but other members of your village and your board can also be out there highlighting your accomplishments. And this can go a long way. So within the board, right, how can you be amplifying each other at work? How can you be supporting each other in these everyday situations? And how can you support each other's advancement? The other thing I would say about building a board is do not hesitate to seek out powerful women in your field to include in your kind of board, your personal board of directors. Interact with powerful women. If you are a powerful woman, seek out women earlier in their career and start developing trusting relationships with them so that you can be an important resource over time. If you are earlier in your career, seek out those powerful women Interact with them proactively and without reservation. Research finds that women tend to underestimate their own value within their professional networks. This is unfortunate for the women who underestimate their value, but also for those that they could be supporting because they don't realize their own influence. So women tend to not be as proactive with other peers, including powerful people in their careers, because they tend to underestimate their own value. Don't do that. Build a board of directors, make sure they're people you trust, will be honest with you, and make sure your board of directors includes people at every stage of the career. Find sponsors. Research suggests that advancing in your career absolutely requires sponsors. And I should say that both in this strategy and the next strategy, men have a vital role to play, both as serving as sponsors, serving as allies to women, but also other women, other more powerful, more influential women more advanced in their career can also play a really important role as sponsors and as allies to other women. So research finds that both when it comes to mentoring and sponsoring, cross-gender relationships are really powerful and impactful. When you have cross-gender mentoring relationships, men are much less likely to hold false assumptions or stereotypes about who women are, about what they need, about what they want in their careers. Because they have relationships with women, they actually can ask women what they want and what they need, and they see with their own eyes how talented and capable women in the mentoring relationship are. Cross-gender mentoring relationships also allow you to build trust, ask questions, get feedback, admit mistakes, right? And this is how we learn and grow. And research finds that when men serve as mentors or sponsors of women, they become much more invested in women's careers and much more aware of gender bias in the job. This is just the contact thesis, right? The more authentic, meaningful contact we can have with each other across gender boundaries, the more likely we are to build solidarity and support each other over time. Now, sponsors are a little bit different from mentors. Sponsors don't necessarily have that kind of intense one-on-one relationship that's sustained over time. Sponsors are people with influence who can give you exposure to other influential or senior people and can help you advance your career. The sponsor's role is to amplify your voice and support your career. So they can advocate for opportunities, and if you're more advanced in your career, the role of the sponsor is to advocate for opportunities for folks earlier in the career, highlight the accomplishments, increase the visibility of your sponsoree, select or recommend your sponsoree for special projects or assignments, and recognize that individual's contributions publicly and privately. Make sure that you're validating their achievements in the backstage while also touting their achievements in the front stage. And the final strategy I'll share today is to recruit allies. Men's engagement in equity and inclusion leads to huge payoffs for organizations and for women's careers. Too often, women are penalized for advocating for equity and inclusion, but men are not. This isn't right, this doesn't make any sense, but it turns out that when women or people of color are advocating for diversity and equity, they're seen as having an agenda. Their voice is kind of dismissed. It's like, well, it's kind of self-interested. But it turns out that when men advocate for gender equity and inclusion, they're seen as legitimate champions without kind of an agenda, just good people doing good work. This means that men, when they're advocating for more equity in their jobs or in their careers, are seen as more effective and incur fewer costs for doing so. Men are seen as more legitimate and credible when they confront bias. Men policing bias in the workplace also increases the confidence of their women colleagues because it legitimizes their experience. And men allies, research finds that when men allies are effective, they empower women to speak up, to confide about their experiences, and to take action necessary to support their own careers. The challenge is that many men, research finds that men tend to underestimate their own bias, and they tend to overestimate how well their organization is doing on these kinds of issues. And the truth is, a lot of these patterns of bias, even though many of you have probably, or most of you have probably experienced one or more, many of these patterns are invisible to men. And we know this because we have really good experimental research where we show a scenario to men and women and we ask them to describe the scenario. And it turns out that men and women are equally capable of describing what happened in the scenario. But while women understand the scenario was an example of bias, men don't see the scenario as necessarily about bias. What this means is that allies have an important role to play if they are able to start to see the patterns that their colleagues are experiencing. Now, allyship is on a continuum. The first step is awareness. As I mentioned, starting to see those patterns, not just see what happens not just observe what happens in a meeting, but actually start to understand that when your woman colleague is constantly interrupted, this is an example of biased behavior, right? Research, for example, finds that men are significantly more likely to interrupt women in meetings than they are to interrupt other men. In other words, not consciously, but they're much more likely to be interrupting women in a very robust and patterned way. Now, gaining awareness of that is the first step on the spectrum of allyship. The next step is active support, building trusting relationships with women colleagues where you can start to actively support them. One of the great things that allies can do is to meet with women in the backstage and say, hey, I noticed that whenever you speak in meetings, you tend to get interrupted. How can I prevent that? What can I be doing in that meeting, right? And there are a lot of things that male allies can be doing in meetings or in work context when they are aware of the pattern. The final step in the continuum of allyship is advocacy. You've gained awareness, you've moved into active support, and now you can begin to advocate for your colleagues, support policies that are going to support your women colleagues, advocate for work groups that are more equal, advocate for advancement for talented women in the job. So what this means is that allyship helps make the invisible visible. And so that allies, including women allies, can be bias interrupters, right? Can be interrupting and disrupting those patterns when they occur in the moment. So what does it mean to recruit allies? Well, and certainly for white women, part of allyship means providing strong allyship for other women of color or LGBTQ women in the workplace, making sure that we're also making ourselves aware of some of these patterns so that we can be advocates and active supporters of our talented colleagues. So how do you recruit? Well, start to share your experiences with some trusted colleagues, right? Start to say, here are some of the challenges I've been facing. I'd like to brainstorm with you, maybe strategies that I can take, or maybe you can take, or we can take together that can make the situation a little better. For example, ask allies to make sure, going back to the interrupting in meetings example, make sure allies are there to say, hey, let's make sure everybody has a chance to contribute, right? Let's make sure, Christy was just saying something important. I'd like to hear what she has to say before we move on, right? All of these subtle things that can redirect to help amplify women's voices. The other thing you can do with allies is to point out bias when it happens and ask them to start to see the patterns and then speak up about it. The goal of allyship is partnership, right? You want to move to a place where you can share influence and knowledge information, and resources so that we can have an open communication with our supportive colleagues about how they can best support us or how we can best support them. So I want to give you my email. If there are things you want to follow up after today's session, by all means, and I'd like us to move into conversation Q&A. I'd love to hear about your experience of some of these patterns, how you've navigated some of these patterns effectively in the past. I'd love to hear ideas about how you can or have implemented some of these strategies. And I'd like to hear from you too, ways you and or your organization are effectively implementing bias disruption practices or policies in everyday work life. So I'd love to open it up now. I'd love to see your faces if that's within the realm of possibility. And I'd certainly love to hear some of your questions, comments, and ideas.
I'll go first. I think it's just great to surround yourself, like you mentioned, with good mentors. I know in my career, personally, I've had those that don't want to be mentors, but I have embraced those that are willing to, even if you don't, necessarily agree for them to be your mentor, but you can kind of see that they just take you under your wing and they help you grow and encourage you and just everything about being a great mentor is there. So you just kind of fall into that. So that's been great as well. And then, it also encourages, like for me to be a mentor to someone else.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, Naomi. I'm the same way. My career has been so enhanced by strong mentors. I've had some people who weren't great mentors, but I've had some amazing mentors, and that has made all the difference in my career. But like you said, I've also been transformed by being a mentor, and by learning to see the work and the job from a different perspective than my own. That's really helped me become a better mentor, but become a better ally too, because for me, it's been through some of those mentoring relationships that I've been challenged to see patterns or things that I might not have seen otherwise. And by the way, you're all welcome to turn on your mic and ask questions, or you can put questions in the chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye out there if that's how you prefer.
So I wanted to hear a little bit more about like the personal board of directors. Like that was something I learned about a lot, like a million years ago. And so I sort of have always had, a little unofficial, but that's, there's I guess, how do you go about navigating that? Or is it, hello, would you like to be on my board? Or is it just like kind of you keep it in your mind and you just talk to them? Or like, how do you manage that? I don't want to, call someone and be like, since you're on my board of directors, I don't know.
Yeah, the link, I'd love to hear if you all have experiences too. I tend to refer to this as my village. I recognized really early on that, I was a first generation college student. So navigating an academic career there was more that I didn't know than I did know, and I needed a lot of support. And so I realized early on that I kind of had to build a village for myself. I don't think I was as intentional or conscious that that's what I was doing, but that's what, in fact, I was doing. Now, I tend to be much more intentional about it. So, for example, I'm always thinking about maybe what's the next step for my career. I don't know if this is, I'm always thinking like, what's the next thing? What's the next challenge? Or what's the next step that I could take? Who's somebody who's done that already, who's done it really well? Who's somebody in that spot where I want to be? But also thinking about people, some of the strongest, villagers for me have been peers. So people kind of going through the career at the same stage where we can share notes and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing. What are you hearing? Or how are you thinking about this? Here's how I'm just to kind of, collaborate. The other thing, this links a lot to networking too, because I think there's a tendency for a lot of women to say, like, I'm a terrible networker. The idea of going to a event and introducing myself to strangers, much less asking strangers for anything, seems, and so what we tend to do, research finds that what women tend to do instead is build really strong, close ties with friends, with a smaller number of friends, rather than kind of big, diffuse ties with a lot of different people. But one of the best ways you can think about networking and this is related to building a village or building a board of directors, is one of the most powerful things you can do as a networker is introduce people that you know, be a connector. Right. So for example, for me, I'm an introvert, and the idea of going into a conference or something and introducing myself makes me terrified. But if I remember that it's not just for my career, but it's also for the other people's career in my network, and that one of my roles can be a connector. So if I meet somebody new and there's somebody else in my kind of village who could really benefit from knowing this person, I'm really comfortable. I've gotten really good at like introducing two people, because it's like, oh, this is going to help them both. These are two like brilliant women who should know each other, right? So, and by virtue of seeing my role as the connector, that means I've grown my own network, right? Because not only am I seeking out really talented people or people who can offer me and others a lot of guidance, but I'm helping them by introducing. So it's a two-way street. It's not just that I'm introducing myself and asking for something. It's that I'm contributing too by helping to connect them to other people. So reframing that in my mind has helped me a lot. So, Naomi mentioned the Women's Leadership Institute. Pat Jones, right? Incredibly talented, influential woman. Now I know that if I know Pat Jones, I can help a lot of other women in a lot of other places in their career connect with her, and that's going to be a real service. And by virtue of doing that, now Pat's in my village, right? As opposed to just seeing it as like a one-way thing. So yeah, I would suggest make a list and think about, what are the experiences, insights that are really going to help me survive and thrive in my career? Who are those people who have knowledge or experience that could be valuable to me? But also look back and say, whose careers could I really support, right? How can I be a support to folks coming up? And put those two lists together, and you've got a real head start on who your village, what your village might look like.
Great. Love that. Great. So we don't have a ton of time left, but I wanted to just check in because I've got more questions, but I can talk about this all day, but I wanted to reach out and see if anyone else had anything they wanted to chat with about or anything before, because I'll ask another one.
Hey, I don't know if it's more of a question or a comment, but you brought up the motherhood thing, and that's definitely a challenge that me myself have ran into in the workplace, and maybe a little bit of the bias is, because I am a mother, and I'm also a mother of a special needs child, and that also made it more difficult, because not only does she have children that are going to require attention, I have one that is going to require a little more attention with doctor's appointments, therapy appointments, some of these other factors. So do you have any recommendations or advice on, and, I am in a current leadership role, and I've been very, very fortunate that my boss is very open to the biasism and is very aware of it.
Yep.
And he takes great care of me, but I know that that's not the case for some people, in learning that some leaders still might need a little flexibility in terms of, but it doesn't mean they're less committed,
Yes. I'm so glad you raised that. That's so important. I mentioned that I just completed a study of the legal profession in Utah, and this came up a lot because, as in for many of your careers in the legal career, the idea of flexible work or giving somebody flexibility, at key moments in the career seems like, crazy. And so what happens is the legal profession is losing so much talent because women are finding a lack of flexibility, a lack of employers willing to actually help them through some of those key times, and they're going elsewhere. And it was a big survey project, but also interviews. And I interviewed so many women who had, similar experiences or stories, who said, it was just for a few years. I just needed a little bit of flexibility. I wasn't going to work less or less. I wasn't going to do lower quality work. I just needed some flexibility. I just needed an employer who would work with me. And because I couldn't get that, I couldn't sustain my commitments to my family and my commitments to the career. But I talked to other women who said, who actually found those employers who would help them and be flexible with them. And they said over time, they would have bosses who would say, the best decision I ever made was giving you flexibility when you needed it. Because those women went on to be superstars. I talked to judges, partners of law firms, like people who are just killing it in the career. But the only way they could get there was because they had employers who were willing to be flexible with them at that key times when they needed it. And it just, and this is one way we as allies or our allies can play an important role too. Because the truth is, all of us need flexibility sometime, not just mothers, right? Survey after survey shows that men want more flexibility when their kids are born and young too, right? We just need flexibility to make our lives work. And having, as long as we understand that having children doesn't make us less intelligent, less talented, less committed, right? And we're just willing to give folks flexibility, boy, we're going to hold on to that talent, and that talent's going to be that's both ability. Being flexible gives us the ability to hold on to that talent, but retain that talent over time. Because the women I spoke to who got that flexibility were like, I am so loyal to this employer, right? I will,
yes.
I am going to give my best work to this employer because this employer gave me that flexibility that I needed. So it's a win-win situation for employers to recognize that flexibility doesn't mean lower quality work. It helps you hold on to talent, helps you retain talent over time, and builds a lot of loyalty among your labor force. But we have to recognize that we need flexibility for men as well as for women, mothers as well as for fathers, and that this isn't about competence or capability or career commitment. This is just about retaining talent. And so as allies, one of the ways we can move into advocacy is, whether we're in the situation of needing flexibility or not, being really strong advocates for that in the workplace, I think can go a long way. That means that mothers aren't the ones saying they need flexibility. It's everybody saying we need flexibility.
I tell my husband that all the time, so I'm glad you said that. I said, you need more flexibility.
That's right. That's right. And men, especially young men, in survey after survey are saying they're looking for careers that give them more flexibility, that help them spend more time with their families. This isn't, we have to, I think it's really important that we stop seeing this as a woman's issue or mother's issue, right? This is just being humane employers retaining talent issue.
Yes, thank you.
I saw a hand. Did someone raise their hand? Is their hand up? Okay.
Yeah,
I think Sarah was,
sorry, yeah, I was just going to bring up the same thing. I'm pretty young, and so we have talked about it a lot as a couple, and he actually would love way more father time than probably I would. I would want to be in the office a lot more. And so finding that balance within each and every family and the choice that you have as a family and moving forward in the employment is important to us.
Yeah, it's a real, employers are going to have to concede on this issue because especially younger men are telling us in surveys that they want to contribute more to caring for children, right? As you know, there's a real gender imbalance in terms of who does most of the childcare. with women carrying most of that burden. But more and more, increasingly, men are saying that they would like to contribute more. The problem is their jobs don't really allow that, right? So if as employers, we're able to increase the flexibility that we give to all employees, this would support women's careers in two ways. Number one, it would support them as your employees because it means you're giving them the flexibility they need to have successful careers. But it also means you're supporting women because you're allowing their partners to contribute more to the care at home. And the more equitable we can make that, the fewer challenges women will face in their career. And again, men are telling us they want this. Right? Men are telling us they want more egalitarian relationships in the home. Men are telling us they want more time to spend with their kids and care for their kids. So we have to, and this gets to a larger issue too about how we understand who the ideal worker is, right? We've traditionally viewed the ideal worker as that person who's willing to be available 24/7, who's willing to sacrifice whatever it takes, who's willing to put in all the hours, and who's kind of a robot and doesn't have a life or responsibilities outside of the workplace. But I think COVID has taught us a lot about how unrealistic some of those expectations are. It's taught us that we can actually give people flexibility in terms of where they work, and they're still going to do really high quality work. It's taught us that we actually need to take care of each other if we want to, make sure that people can get through crises and challenges and get through to the other side and continue to contribute to work. But this is we have lots of evidence to suggest that we just need to make our work lives more reasonable. There's some proposals about, for example, about a reduced work week. And the evidence shows that when employers reduce the work week, productivities and profits significantly increase. People are more productive when they're well rested, when they feel like they can manage their other responsibilities. So this is part of a larger conversation, I think, about how we have to rethink the intense work culture that too many of us have faced.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so we're running out of time. I love that topic. It's so interesting too. We had somebody, I think it was back in October, we had the president of the women's division of the Department of Labor did a call with us from Washington, and she talked about, the history of kind of women's rights in the workplace and how that evolved, and it kind of came from people becoming mothers and do that. But so it's really exciting to see kind of where we've come, and then into the future and all the opportunities. I feel like it gets better all the time, and we're so lucky to have our network of women here, our women in safety group. So I think and that's a lot of fun. And I'm looking at the names, and I'm seeing these great comments. I appreciated the comment from Evelyn and the comments from Sarah, but I've been trying to get brave enough to reach out and bother Evelyn to say, hey, Evelyn, I need you to help guide me. I need your guidance. And so now I see she's on the call. She's making these comments and it's on topic. So I'm going to bother her about that. But just quickly, I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Glass. We really enjoyed having you, and we are hoping to invite you back soon.
I'd love it. And I just want to say, what you're doing here is a big part of that building a village, recruiting allies, developing sponsors and mentors, and becoming sponsors and mentors. These kinds of groups are really powerful mechanisms for helping us all survive and thrive. So thank you for forming the group and leading the group. I just think this is terrific.
Well, thank you for participating, and we will keep in touch. And since you shared your email and PowerPoint and stuff, I'll include that in the wrap-up email that I send everybody. so that we can all be parts of each other's village moving forward.
Absolutely. Terrific.
Love it. Okay, so I want to say thank you, and then I have 2 quick polls, and I'm just going to tell you dates that are coming up quickly, and I will follow up with that. So let's see if my let's see how good my poll skills are. I'm putting out 1 of 2, and then let's see if I can do the second one. Right, well, I'll let you do that one for a second, and then, well, can you see that? Yes. You mean thumbs up? Okay. And then, I don't know. Okay, let me try and get, oh, wait, no, I think I got it. That one was August. Let's do.
Nobody has voted yet. Oh, hosts and panels can't vote.
Oh. So hosts and panelists can't vote. Yeah, that's cool. And we're all panelists.
I can put everyone down as attendees again.
Yeah, let's fix that really quick. Okay, so while Megan is fixing that quickly for the poll, so here's what's coming up. Okay, June 16th is going to be our next event. It's not going to be in person. We're still trying to be super safe. I know I'm fully vaccinated. A lot of my team is too, but we're still trying to be safe. August 1st is when we open our awards, right? For the Women in Safety Awards, the WISH Awards. So that's coming up in August. Well, August 1st is like a Sunday, so it'll probably be August 2nd. So watch for that. The 30th is when we will close the deadlines. And then October 20th is when we have Caroline Gleich that comes back. So my other poll was in conjunction with that, but maybe I'll just include it in the email as we kind of plan that. And then our that will be our October 20th, and then our December 15th event will be the WISH Award. So those are your dates. I will include that in the email, and we will talk soon. Thank you. Oh, well, everybody signed out mostly. We've got a couple of people.
No, if you just look at.
Oh, is that? Oh, they're not signing out. Megan's just changing their status. I'm thinking everyone's just hanging up. Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I was trying to wrap really quick. But so there's that first poll about August. Basically, we just want to know if you're going to be comfortable in August doing an in-person event. And then when we have October, when we have Caroline coming back, Caroline Gleich, we wanted to know, that was going to be an in-person event, but we want to know if it's better to do morning or kind of a luncheon event, or maybe kind of an early evening type of a situation. Things have just changed so much, right, since COVID. And so just quickly, if I can send that poll, I'd appreciate the response. And then yeah, that'll be it.
So we have 14 of 17 people that have responded.
To both, or just the one?
Just the one. You can only open one poll at a time.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to end this first poll, right? I'm going to end it, and then I'm going to put the second one on there. And then, okay, thanks. Perfect. Okay, and then if you just want to go ahead and put your vote in there, and then we will see you June 16th. So I will definitely communicate the next steps and ways to follow up and sign up for those. We haven't published that yet, just wanted to make you aware of the dates. So thank you again for joining us, and once you're done with the poll, feel free to log out, and I will follow up soon.